Hi, everyone. My name is Daniel Steger. I am the Technical Community Manager here at the Center for Open Science. Center for Open Science is a nonprofit organization that runs the Open Science Framework, or the OSF. I am joined here by fellow product team members where we know the ins and outs of the OSF. So if you're here to learn about the OSF, you've come to the right place. So throughout this process, if you have questions, make sure to post them into the chat. I'm going to be going through and giving a very high-level overview of the OSF, some open science concepts, different examples, all sorts of fun things to help you really get started on your open research journey. With that being said, I'm going to provide a few resources so that you don't have to follow along, because I do tend to move pretty quickly through this particular webinar. So I am going to share this with everyone. This is a notes doc that you can have and make a copy of if you'd like, but it is really just a document of an outline of the things that we're going to be talking about. Now, not everything is included, but it gives you a really great starting place for how to understand the things that we're going to be talking about. And then if you do have questions, again, ask them in the chat, or we'll be providing that information for you. Wonderful. All right. So before we get started, like any good presentation, I want to know my audience. I want to know the group that I'm working with here. So it looks like we're going to be somewhere around 50, 60, 80 people. That's a little bit on the smaller side for our groups, but hopefully we'll get some really good engagement. So I want to know, why are you here? So what kind of understanding of the OSF do you have? Do you have an account? With that, it's just information that helps me be able to gloss over certain things or really dive into information. So we have quite a few people who are familiar and have an account with the OSF, but maybe they want to learn more. So not familiar, slightly familiar, wonderful things. If you do, again, thank you, Crystal, for adding that again in the chat. If you do have questions, use the QA function. Our team is happy to answer, especially as we're going through. So, all right. Okay. So dive into a little bit of detail on everything, but we do mostly have OSF accounts. So I'll talk a little bit about that. All right. With that, I'm going to go on to our next slide. We're going to do a little bit of an overview of the format. So the topics we're going to be talking about today are how to create an account, looking at your OSF profile, how are you going to discover content on the OSF, and the flip side of that is being able to share your content on the OSF. Research planning, so registrations, pre-registrations, and what some of the differences are between those things. Study management plans, collaborations, so some of the tools that we provide, like the OSF projects, for how you can work with your team in order to create an open and transparent tool to help everybody get started. My coffee hasn't kicked in yet, so bear with me. Whoops. Research sharing, OSF preprints. So we do have a preprint server along with other different preprint tools that you can use for different communities, and some of the relationships of connecting your resources across the OSF. Now, as I said, I do tend to move kind of quickly through this, but one of the great things about this monthly webinar is I'm able to kind of shift the amount of information that I put either towards different sections. So what we do is we do have a resource center of videos where we do have taken deep dives into different sections. So say we've taken a deep dive into some of the registrations and pre-registrations. If you want to look at some of those videos and some of the content of that, we do have that information available for you. So let's get started. What is the OSF? So the OSF is a free open source online platform designed to support researchers throughout the entire research lifecycle. So regardless of where you are and what step you're in on that research lifecycle, we have tools that can help you both collaborate with your partners, but then share your work openly and transparently, following some open science missions and ideals. The core idea is that it helps you facilitate a lot of these different initiatives for open science. But again, all these tools are supposed to be able to be connected together and help you support what you actually already are doing. Now, I'm going to take a quick tangent here. Uh, Currently, right now, part of my job is to work with users, and we want to understand how you use the OSF. And what we're doing is we're conducting some interview studies where they're just little quick 15-minute interviews on different topics. Right now, I'm conducting one on the onboarding process, where we are trying to teach users how to use the OSF and some of the tools that we provide to do that. If you are interested in having a quick 15-minute interview with me, where I personally will ask you questions about your adoption process, why you're here at the OSF, and how you're using some of these tools, and we can get your feedback. If you're interested in doing something like that, I'm going to post that link in the chat, and I'm going to reiterate this later again. This is just a survey form, but after you fill it out, it will have a calendar link, or I will be emailing you directly, and then we can set up a time to talk. Again, completely optional if you so choose. Thought I would offer it to this group because everybody here is relatively new, and that's kind of people you want to talk about for that particular study. Okay, moving forward. Accounts and profile. So when you are on the OSF, you are going to be creating an account. Now, some of you have an account, some of you don't. In that case, I'm going to actually log out, and you would just go to osf.io. This is the general normal domain for our website. If you do not have an account on the OSF, the first thing that you're going to do is go to the sign up button. This is the green button up in the top right-hand corner. I'm going to click that button, and it's going to give me a couple of different options. Really, there's 3 different options. The first one is pretty much the simplest option. You put your full name, a contact email, confirm that email, create a password, make sure you've read our terms and conditions and privacy policy, confirm that you're not a robot, sign up. A confirmation email will be sent to that email. You'll be able to confirm and start on the OSF. Secondly, there are a couple of other ways of doing this. ORCID is actually a persistent identifier for researchers in themselves. So if you want to aggregate all of your work in a much more permanent fashion, where you're able to kind of connect all the things that you do to your ORCID profile, which are, again, very helpful for things like grant reporting, but they're becoming more and more common. All you would do is create an ORCID account. So I could go to orcid.org, and I would either sign in or register. In my case, I do already have an account on ORCID, and I could sign in, or I can create an account through registering. The great thing about that is that once you connect and sign in through ORCID, it will show up and connect directly to your OSF account. Additionally, we have a tool called institutions. Now, OSF institutions do not include all institutions on the world. They're not all the colleges, all of the groups and universities and things like that. This is actually a fee-for-service product that we provide specifically to higher up institution members, those groups. The benefit for those groups is that they're able to aggregate all of the work from users on the OSF into one dashboard space. They're able to get metrics, all sorts of great things that come out of that. But for you as the user, you're actually able to sign in through an institution. So say for me, if I wanted to, I could go to one of these institution pages. I could see if one of my institutions are available here. So I just so happen to be an alumni of Virginia Tech. I could click Virginia Tech, and I could sign in through their specific sign-in portals. That blanking on the word again. That login service of connecting a institution's login to your OSF login is part of that fee-for-service product, which is really great. Yes. Rutgers is another one. Fantastic. Thank you so much for putting that in the chat. So With that being said, your login, so if you want to sign in after you've created an account, that is very similar to that same process. Email, password, or sign in through Orchid, or sign in through institutions. I am going to just sign up through you know what? I'm going to sign in through Orchid. What's this? When I clicked that button, it actually took me to the Orchid sign in. All I'm going to do is sign in through Orchid. And what I did here is I also have what's called two-factor. Now, this is becoming more and more common in the world nowadays, but all that this does is it creates a link between the OSF and a temporary password that changes every 30 seconds. And it's just an extra level of security. I do suggest that you do this, even if you do put it in incorrectly on your site in front of 80 people or 6, and it'll help you log in. Again, you want to make sure that your research is secure and that nobody is logging in for you. This takes you to your OSF dashboard. This is pretty much your homepage when you join the OSF. What it would do is you're able to search through your projects, your registrations, anything you've put onto the OSF, and this is private and specific to what you're doing. So all of my OSF tools that I've created, my projects, my registrations, my preprints, they would all be found here. And I'm able to kind of search based on keywords. So if I say, just type in COS, I'm able to look at all of the pages that have that particular thing. This doesn't freeze on me. Moving forward while that loads, one thing I do want to point out is a new support tool that we have actually just launched in this last week. Down here in the right-hand corner, you will see a little help button. A lot of people overlook this particular help button, but this is specifically designed to support you regardless of where you are in the OSF. Now, as we go through today, you'll be able to click on this help button and you will see different help guides. So this page will populate with different help guides that are specific to that page that you're on. The idea being that we want to make sure that you have the resources that you need in app to help you understand and learn how to use the OSF. Sometimes you'll see different pop-ups for onboarding services or a survey or something along those lines. Any of those things are just there to, one, help support you, but then two, also get information so that we can help improve the OSF moving forward. If you do have feedback on that, do provide that because that is a pilot that we are testing right now. Now, one thing that I want to point out is your profile page. We're going to talk about this relatively quickly. Up here in the top right-hand corner, you'll see a little drop-down arrow. I'm going to drop it down and then click on My Profile. This is a page that's going to be getting a little bit of a update in hopefully the next year or so. But right now, all that this does is shows any of the public projects or public components, two things that we're going to talk about again later today, that you have available to the world. This has a very specific link. So if you want to share your public projects, your public components, you have your own unique URL that you can share with the world. Additionally, again, because I signed in through Orchid, my Orchid link is then connected right here. I could put information about my employer, my education, anything that you want to share with the world. Again, if I want to edit any of this information, I'm going to go here to edit your profile. Important thing to note is that the name tab here is what your name will be on your citation line. So note Daniel Steger, that is actually going to be shown here as my citation preview. Additionally, if I want to add any other information, again, Orchid, Research ID, Twitter handle, LinkedIn, anything that I would like to share with the world, I can here. All I would need to do is put in that information and click the little green save button down at the bottom. Again, if I do need to do things like, say, change my profile or add a additional contact email, one thing that I do suggest is that if you have a an institution email that you use predominantly. I would also add another email address that is not associated with your work. So a Gmail, something that's private to you. The idea being that people change jobs, people lose jobs, things like that. So if you want, all you would need to do is add an alternative email address so that you make sure that you don't lose access to your account. But if you want to change what email is the primary, all you would need to do is click that Make Primary button. All right, scrolling down, there's a couple of different other informations. Again, if you want to change your password, this is another way of doing it. Down here, security settings, that two-factor authorization, that's how you would enable it or disable it. And then deactivating your account. What this does is it will actually send an email to our support team. We will send you another email back explaining what the process is for deactivating your email. And we'll continue on with that process if you do choose to do that. All right. Back to our dashboard. Discovering content on the OSF, our search and discover section. Now, again, this search and discover section, we encourage people to post all of their data, all those things that are available on that entire research lifecycle. So regardless of where you are in the OSF, you should be able to share your work, right? Be able to share with your community and share with others. Now, with that, how do you find that on the OSF? Now, up here in the top bar in the middle, you will see a little button that says search. What you're going to do is you're going to click search, and this will take you to our brand new search dashboard, where you're able to look through all of the resources that are found on the OSF. Now, the navigation on this is fairly intuitive, so I'll kind of gloss over some of it. If you're looking for all things on the OSF, all you would do is click this tab in the middle that says all. If you're looking for only OSF projects, only OSF registrations and pre-registrations, you would click those tabs, preprints, files, or if you're looking for a specific user, you can also click on that. All of these things, when you click on it, change the URL. So you can add compounding factors all by just clicking on these buttons on the OSF. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to click on projects, and then I'm going to look at the side tab, because all this is ways of applying additional filters to your search terms. So right now I have over 10,000 results for OSF projects. There's over 10,000 OSF projects on the OSF. That's not super helpful for searching through things. But what I can do is I could look into all of the ways that people have described their work. For those who don't know, that is called metadata. It's basically data describing your work. But this is the place when that information is useful. I'll show you how to add that for different tools on the OSF. But when someone is searching through the OSF, it's both important for you to find their work and they to find your work. With that being said, I'm going to say limit the number of results that I'm going to see to who funded it. So who's added funding to these works? So I see 74 people have added projects that were funded by the National Science Foundation. Now I've limited my results to just that group. I can look at the you can look at all of the different sections, so projects, components, anything along those lines, and I can see when that work was added and modified. Now, what if I wanted to reset this particular filter? Well, all I would need to do is change the URL. I would need to go to any other section here, click. Let's say if I go to, let's look at registrations, and then those that are CC BY license, international, and then I want things that are only study registrations and that are only found at the University of Maryland. All of those things are just compounding metadata fields. So someone on their project or their registration went through and filled out that this was a CC BY license, that this was a study registration under resource type and that they were under the University of Maryland. Now, the great thing about this is, say I am a graduate student and I am trying to figure out a search criteria for all the things that I want to find on the OSF, and I want to share this list with my PI. All I would do is go up here to the main URL, and as I was clicking all those changes, I was changing that URL. So what I can do right now is I could post that URL into the webinar chat, and you all can now click on that link and it will take you directly to exactly what I'm seeing in the OSF, which is kind of fun. All right. If you do have questions on this, again, OSF chat or the OSF search, I do suggest clicking that beacon down here, because again, you will see a getting started on the OSF search video where we dive in a little bit more to that section. And then also, actually, let's refresh that. Apologize. You'll be able to see getting started with search, navigating, and some help guides to help you navigate and really optimize your searching of the OSF. Go back to the main dashboard, and we're going to move on to research planning and registrations and pre-registrations. Now, a lot of people who come here have questions about registrations and pre-registrations. They are becoming more common in requirements for funders and publishers. So this is kind of a point where do ask questions in the Q&A. Our team will definitely help you along that process, but I'm going to try and give a broad overview as to what some of these terms mean. Now, if you're thinking about a typical trajectory of a study, you go through this design, you conduct the study, you report on the study, and then you publish the study. The peer review process typically happens between that report and publish, but to their credit, how would they really know if anything changed from the start to the finish? You haven't really kind of created that story. So the idea is that with a registration or a pre-registration, you're essentially calling your shot. So at this point where you're designing the study, you are submitting that study into what is called a pre-registration or registration. You're locking that study in place with a timestamp saying that at this moment in time, this was my plan. The idea being that if you don't do that, it's kind of like you're firing an arrow, and wherever that arrow lands, you could, in theory, draw a target around that arrow and say, yeah, I totally meant to do that. Or you could do things like harking, which is hypothesizing after a result is known. And you're kind of shifting what your original plan was to fit your results. Things like that unfortunately do sometimes happen in science, tend to undercut the overall faith in science and the reproducibility of understanding that if someone repeats your work, they will be able to reproduce what you've done. Now that's different priorities for different disciplines, but that's the general idea of what a pre-registration is. The other way of looking at it is that it's, especially for qualitative researchers, it's a way of locking your perspective in place, because as a former qualitative researcher or mixed method researcher, I have had a study plan, and then as I'm going through the interview process, you kind of lose track of where you were and thinking, was that my plan? Was that how I really wanted to be answering questions? Because every iteration of your interview, you kind of refine it based on how things have went. This just helped you kind of keep that in place as well. So why pre-register? It's a timestamp read-only version of your study. It is a public registry, if you so choose, and it shows how your study was supposed to be conducted. It's a formal, transparent story of your research management plan. That's where it originally started. And at this point, you are also able to do things like connect all of your pieces of your research plan, all the outputs that came out of that original research plan, you can connect it back to a pre-registration so that if someone finds your work, They're able to find all of those pieces that can happen. Now, a typical question that we do get along this point in time is, what is the difference between a pre-registration and a registration? Now, oftentimes they are used synonymously throughout the OSF, but in reality, they are slightly different. And it really just comes down to timing. Pre-registrations typically occur and are submitted prior to conducting an experiment, prior to actually collecting that data. Whereas a registration can actually be submitted really any time between conducting and publishing. Obviously, for transparency's sake, a pre-registration typically is a little bit more valuable because you have locked it in place prior to conducting, and you're not really kind of changing as you're knowing what the data is. But that being said, we don't want to lock you in place. They are a plan, not a prison. So the idea being that throughout your entire process, you can actually update that registration. So while you've locked it in place as a time-stamped version of your registration, you can then submit another version of that registration, and every version connects back to that first one. The idea being that with every iteration, you can show what's changed, and a user or someone who's following along can see every version that's changed. It's similar to those old image flip books where you have a person kind of running and it's you're flipping through like a note stack or something, but every picture is a slightly different iteration of what it is. But then together you can kind of see what that full story looks like. Another question that we typically get at this point is the idea of scooping, somebody taking your work. If I'm submitting my plan here, what's to stop someone from taking my work and publishing before I do? It's an ugly side of science, but it does unfortunately occur. We do offer what's called embargoing. The idea being that if you're going to submit, say, a pre-registration or a registration, you can make that tool private for up to 4 years. That gives you up to 4 years to complete, conduct, report, and publish that study. And then what you can do is you can take that link after you have published, you can connect your published work back to your pre-registration and say, hey, you remember 4 years ago? I called exactly what I was going to do, and this is what my results are. All that does is add gravitas, it adds importance to your work. It just basically says, I did exactly what I said I was going to do. And that in itself are valuable. And it's one of the reasons why a lot of funding agencies or even publishers are starting to now ask for this along the line. Now, what does that look like on the OSF? Well, when you are actually going through and registering something on the OSF, I'm going to click out of this. When you are registering something on the OSF and it is actually private, that will look something like this. So to the outside world, if I click on an embargo registration, it's going to look something like this. It's going to come up with page not found. Now, to an outside user, this doesn't look like anything. But say I wanted to share my registration with someone that I really trusted. I'm going to take that same link, and what I can do is share what's called a view-only link. That view-only link doesn't add this person to the project, but all it does is give access to what that same registration is. Now, if you'll note, this is the same exact registration, the private version versus the view-only access version. So someone can come in and look at it if you give them access to. Right. Going back here, what does the approve or reject process look like? So for any administrators on a registration, what that process is going to look like is when you are finally finished inputting all of your information for a registration, you will be able to send out it will automatically send out an email that says, here's how to approve or cancel a registration. Uh, the beautiful thing about this is that you will have 48 hours to actually reject your submission. And the only people who are rejecting or approving the submission are the admin who are on that registration. Now, let's kind of explore what that looks like. I'm going to go to our test site here because registrations, again, are a little bit more permanent than some of our other tools. And let's show you what that process is for adding a registration to the OSF. Now, up here, to start off, I'm going to go to Add New. And I'll have the choice of creating a registration from an existing OSF project. That can be valuable if you've already filled out an OSF project with all the information and files and things that you would like on your registration, or if you're just starting off and you have an idea of what your study plan is going to look like. You can start off by saying, no, I'm not going to connect this to that. And what we'll do is after you've submitted, we'll create an automatic OSF project for you that will connect to your work. And you're able to use that as a flexible workspace for your planning, your data analysis, any connections that you actually want to make, but you don't necessarily have to have it at the start here. Next thing I'm going to ask is what type of registration would you like to create? The two most common registrations we have on the OSF are the pre-registration and then the open-ended registration. Now, they are kind of completely polar opposites when it comes to templates. The pre-registrations offer a series of questions that help you kind of think through what your registration is going to look like. It offers a lot of what that study plan and the questions you would really be asking yourself as you are designing a study. This helps you kind of think through that process. An open-ended registration is kind of the opposite. It's just a document that you would upload and a summary of what that document is, and that's it. They do have pros and cons. The benefit of a pre-registration, the OSF pre-registration, is that everything is kind of on a template. You're able to think through your study, and you're able to update that template very easily. Whereas the open-ended registration, you're not able to actually update specific files on the OSF. So any file that's attached to a registration actually isn't able to be updated. So the open-ended registration is really easy for getting started, but if you do make changes to your study later on, it becomes a little bit more difficult. I typically suggest the OSF pre-registration, but another thing to note is that we do have a bunch of other community-developed registration templates. If you do have a community or a pre-registration template that your community uses, please let us know. We have an evaluation group who goes through that process of looking and adding new registration templates to the OSF. We actually have a few more that are coming in by the end of the year. Pre-registration, what does that look like? I'm going to create a draft and I'm going to go through. Now, it's going to ask me some basic metadata. Again, metadata is what we were searching for in the OSF. So title, description, any affiliated institutions that I would like. So I have the demo site and support center. I get to choose what license I would like. And then even, again, browse by subject. Now, if I do have questions on, say, what license I want to choose, I would go down here to the support thing, this little help beacon, and type in, say, license. And you can choose information about licensing. So why licensing? Why would this work? And then even choosing what license description, all this information could be extremely valuable for when you are choosing what you want to do. Additionally, I'm going to go through the rest of this process fairly quickly. Study information. I'm going to type in what hypothesis, the data design plan, all the questions that you would really be asking yourself as you were designing a study. Now, again, we're going to get all the way down to the end here where I'm going to have a chance to review this information. Again, any admin on your project or your registration, will be sent this email for approve or reject. Anybody that is a read or write access or just a read access will receive an email here that is just saying, hey, there has been a pre-registration submitted with your name on it. But they won't have the ability to approve or reject. Okay, let's move forward a little bit here. Study management and collaboration, OSF projects. This is a tool that you can use on the OSF that really helps you collaborate with your team. Now, OSF projects are very flexible. They can be used during the planning phase, the conducting phase, the reporting phase, even some of your discovery work that we have. You can add metadata to both the files and the OSF project to help users find anything that you really want them to find from your work. Now, there are a couple different ways that you can create an OSF project. And I typically describe this in the most simple manner, just to kind of help people wrap their heads around it. But say you're in a research group, you would just start designing your OSF projects in this hierarchy form. So at the highest level, your project level, they work on a parent to child relationship. So at that top level, like you would design your folders on, say, Google Drive or something along those lines, that top level would be your lab group. Next group down for your next folder down would be your research initiatives, 1 and 2. And then inside each one, you would have those steps, those folders that you would really like. If you have questions on that process, what that looks like, I'm going to put this particular help guide in the chat here that can help you kind of get started with this framing of how you would like your projects to work. Now, again, these different groups actually work off of what are called projects and then components. I mentioned that as we were looking at that profile page. But each level describes both that OSF project and then components within it. Again, think about them kind of like folders and then subfolders. It's just ways of organizing your work. Now, if you were to think about it as a folder, this is much more rich to send to your collaborators. You can add what's called a wiki section that allows you to describe what is in this folder, this OSF project. You have a citation that you're able to cite each component and each project. You're able to create DOIs for public projects, so digital object identifiers, very specific permanent links that you can share with your collaborators. You can change who has view access. You can make them public or private, and each component within it can be made public or private. So the idea being that if you want to share all of your work, but you don't want to share your data collection, your protocols, your hypotheses, things like that, you can make those components private, but you can also make your different initiatives private. So if I wanted to make my research initiative 2 private, I can also make my research initiative 1 public. Again, completely flexible, which is a little bit different than what we were seeing with registrations. Again, each one of these sections are kind of in a nesting doll type of structure. If you're thinking about the OSF as a data repository, which it is, each OSF project has a storage gigabyte limit of 5 gigabytes if you keep it private versus 50 gigabytes if you're able to make it public. Now, here's the catch. Each component within your project has an additional 5 gigabyte, 50 gigabyte limit. So if you wanted to really expand out your project, you can kind of expand it out based on how many components you have and really have as much storage as you really need. We do have tools called add-ons, which allow you to connect your current storage provider, your current tools that you use as a research platform to your OSF project. The beautiful thing about that is that if you have a file structure in Google Drive, you don't necessarily need to change that completely. You don't have to move everything over to the OSF. With a simple click of a button, you can connect your OSF or your Google Drive folders to an OSF project or component. Again, one thing that I didn't mention at the start, but something that we do want to mention here is that we are not the only research tool on the planet. And we do not want to be. We do not want to compete with Google Drive. We do not want to compete with some of these other tools that you use on a daily basis. Instead, what we're going to be doing is creating what are called add-ons that connect your tools you already use to the OSF. So I do suggest you look through some of our add-on tools and see what connects to the OSF. I'm going to move forward a little bit here. I did gloss over the OSF projects a little bit quickly. We do have an onboarding video on our support site where you can dive into how to make OSF projects and how to use some of our templated OSF projects to really give you a head start on that. This OSF project overview is a really great, it's basically a section of one of these OSF 101 onboarding webinars. But I take a really deep dive into OSF projects. As I said, I have to kind of shift how much information we provide at different sections just based on timing. But if you do have questions on OSF projects, please do let us know. Okay, OSF preprints. Let's talk a little bit about what a preprint is. Now, a preprint is a pre-publication that is your work. So before you submit to, say, your research journal of choice, you can submit what's called a preprint or a pre-publication. Now, the OSF itself is a general preprint repository. So you have a manuscript or something that you would like to share with the world, or maybe you've gone through the submission process and you've submitted to every journal you can think of and it hasn't been accepted. The OSF is a really great place to submit that work. Now, the process for submitting a OSF preprint or any preprint is fairly simple. What you would do is go to our OSF preprints page up here in the top corner, choosing the drop down for OSF preprints. This will take you to our preprints page. First step in your journey is you're going to have your manuscript ready. You're going to go up to the top bar where it says Add Preprints. Now that you are on our Preprints Select services, what you can do is you can look at each one of our preprint services. Now, again, the OSF itself is a preprint repository. We're a generous repository. We do not limit based on discipline, area, subject matter, anything like that. But say you want to reach a very specific community. So like paleo archives that work for, paleontology. If you're a paleontologist, you can submit to paleo archives by simply clicking select and then going down here to the bottom and then clicking create preprint. Same thing goes for, say, biohacker, education archives, anything that you would need to submit for your specific community. This is a great way of doing that. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to submit to the OSF repository, and I'm going to click Create Preprint. Now, again, this kind of feels very familiar to if you just submitted a registration. This process kind of feels familiar. That interface is kind of very similar here, where we're going through and filling out the metadata of title, the abstract of that information. Now, on this particular tool, we actually have to fill out the information before we get all the way through. So right now I'm just putting in general information. Actually, I'm going to do this on our test site so I can show you a little bit further. Apologize. We can go a little bit faster into this. And as you can see, I'm just going through this at lightning speed so we can catch back up. I'm going to select the OSF. I'm going to click Create Preprint. And now I can start putting in funny information just because we don't want this to be real. Now we're going to click Abstract, put that information in, and to move forward, I'm going to click Next. I'm going to upload a file from our computer. In this case, I can upload any type of file from my computer. I have a documentation that says COVID-19 data. All I'm doing right now is I'm dragging and dropping that folder. And I'll have to do upload and drag and drop into the box. Wait till it turns green. drop it, and then load, load, and now it is loaded onto the page. I'm going to click next, and now I can start moving forward and adding things. So contributors, again, selecting licenses. Do I want to add someone else to the project? So I can search by their name, or I can add them by an email address. In this case, I'm not going to add anyone, but if I wanted to, actually, you know what? Add one of our product friends who's not here, so they'll get a little surprise. I'm going to add them as a read and write contributor, but if you have questions on what each contributor level means, I do suggest checking out our help beacon and searching for contributor information. I'm going to click the little green add button, and that adds them to the group. I'm going to choose what affiliations I want. I want one. I'm going to select what license I want. And again, subjects are very important for when you're searching as well. So if somebody's on the OSF and they only want to find business information, you want to make sure that your work is checked the correct box. So in this case, selecting business. Has this work already been published? Are you going back and trying to share as much as possible? So if it is okay with your journal that you've submitted to, I would suggest also adding it on a preprint service. And by doing that, you can take the DOI, the digital object identifier that they give you, the persistent identifier that they give you, and you can connect it directly here to your publication DOI. The great thing about that is that you have now created two pathways for somebody to find your work. One, they can find it directly on that journal, or say they find it through the OSF, they now have a direct link between your preprint and the published version of that preprint. It just helps you get more views and more eyes on your work. Again, I'm going to click through some of this information, see if I can click next. Cool. Author assertions. I'm going to click no, not applicable, and not applicable. But I do suggest you look through the conflict of interest. Is there any public data, any public registrations? Now, a good thing to note is that say you create a registration or pre-registration on the OSF, you can click that available. You can choose whether it's a study plan, analysis plan, and then you can create a link directly to that registration. Again, creating as many connections as possible between your work and what is available. I'm going to click not applicable here because I do not have a pre-registration. Are there any supplemental information? So do you want to connect an existing OSF project, that storage collaboration tool that we had talked about, or do you want to create a new OSF project? Both of those are optional steps here for a preprint. And then you're going to click next. I'm going to get a chance to review this information. And then I'm going to click submit. Now, the OSF is a moderated service that uses pre-moderation. So that means that before it goes live, we actually have moderators on our team who will look at your work, not from really a content standpoint, but for more of a, is this appropriate for the OSF? Is this, we do have moderation information that I believe one of our team members can post in the chat for you. But again, this in particular probably wouldn't make it through our moderation process. This is not a manuscript. This does not have any study information in it. It's just a document that has a couple of tests. But again, this information is available. Now, what if I wanted to edit this? What if I wanted to add a new version of this particular preprint? All I would do is go up here to the top left-hand corner where this blue button says Edit Preprint. Click on it. And then I can say change the title. I could change the abstract. All those things are possible. And then click through again and able to submit that updated version. Now, as you see, I have updated my abstract and a little bit of my title as well. So again, these aren't really locked in. Say I uploaded a new version of my file, you would see those versions in 1, 2, and 3. Okay. Connecting resources across the OSF. Each of your tools that you've created on the OSF have the ability to be connected with each other. You can also connect your work to your ORCID ID on the OSF. Now, unfortunately, I do not have enough time on this particular webinar. But what we can do is we can send this information in, see if I have that. Um, Maybe as we get to the end, I can share a video because we did take a little bit of time on this to connect your resources and how you would go about doing that on the OSF. But the idea being that using DOIs, those digital object identifiers for public available information on the OSF, and your ORCID profile, you can actually create connections. And the idea being that if someone finds your project, someone finds your preprint or your registration, they can find the rest of your work. The beautiful thing about that is that it's almost like you're telling a story, and you're able to connect all of your chapters together so that if someone finds one, they're able to find the full research output of your stories. Now, again, I went through all of this very quickly. This was a very quick webinar. I do have a ton of information that I can provide to you. We do have video references. This is a great place where you can look at all these resources. We have our OSF Support Center, our help.osf.io. We actually did a deep dive into registrations where I can post some of that information as well. We have monthly tips and tricks for new and innovative ways of using the OSF. If you have questions on how to use the OSF, go to support@osf.io. And we also have webinars, events, all sorts of things to help you get started. I talked about a couple of different fee-for-service products, like our preprint services, our institution members. If you do have questions on that, again, please reach out. We can work with you to see if there is a product on the OSF that would be useful to your group. Something to note is that we are a nonprofit, so all of our prices are pretty much just to keep the lights on. They are at that level. If you do have questions, feature requests, ways of improving the OSF, please, again, reach out to us. Our onboarding process is something that we are currently investigating along with those beacon tools. So if you do want to participate in a 15-minute study with me, do fill out that form and I will reach out to you probably later today to try and schedule a time where you and I can meet one-on-one and talk about your opinions on how we help people learn about the OSF. Okay. With that, we have 5 minutes for questions. I'm going to let the team, actually, we're going to see if there's any other questions. Does anyone from the team want to help me out and see, are there any questions that you would like me to answer live on? Seems like we've answered quite a few here. Where's the form for doing appointments? We do have office hour appointments. That will be a link that will go out in the automatic email that comes out. If you are interested in doing a interview with me, where I ask you specifically about your experience adopting the OSF, that would be the link that I just posted in the chat here, and I'll post it again. Yes, interview with me. Posting that here. It's a quick survey, and then you will see a link once you submit to schedule a meeting with me. But if you do not choose to, then that is okay. With that, I'm going to do a closing poll. I would love to get your feedback on what you thought about this OSF 101 Getting Started webinar, whether you found it useful or not. And then a couple of statements on you learned something new from this. What topics would you like to also learn about more in depth? I would like to also note that we listen to these information. We just hosted a pre-registration registration deep dive webinar for attendees like this. So if that is something that you'd be useful, make sure that you vote for that in the chat. Ooh, someone's asking about registered reports in the chat. Um, I'm not 100% sure how long the registered report stage one usually takes. Does anyone on this team have any familiarity with that? Or
It usually depends on the journal you're submitting to. We do have registered reports through OSF, which is where you can submit it and send to a journal. Now, how long it takes for them to review is up to them. We automatically accept all registered reports that are submitted to OSF within 1 to 2 business days.
wonderful. I appreciate that. Okay. Most people found it useful, which is good. I'll take that. I always feel like it's our team members who are voting that it's not useful. You guys sabotaging me? Just quite curious. Anyways,
We're
um,
not allowed to vote.
you're not allowed to vote?
No.
That's a shame. Okay.
If we
Anyways,
could, we would definitely be sabotaging you. It's always fun.
absolutely. Absolutely. Um, with that, I would like to thank all the attendees for this particular webinar. Uh, it is always an honor talking to you guys about the OSF. If you have questions, please reach out to us. Reach out to our support center. We are always more than happy to talk with you about our passion, open science, and how to help you get started sharing your work. So again, if you have any questions, please do let us know. With that, we will close out the webinar, and we hope to see you next time.